Imagine waking up one morning in the year 1965. You live on a tiny island in Southeast Asia, so small that you could drive across it in less than an hour. There is no army, there is no fresh water, there is no land to grow food. Your neighbors are much large and not exactly friendly. And then suddenly you are forced to be independent. That is exactly what happened to Singapore. On 9 August 1965, Singapore was expelled from Malaysia. The Prime Minister Lee Kuan Yew broke down on live television. He cried. He was not crying because he was weak. He was crying because he knew the truth. This island had no natural resources, not even sand or gravel for construction. It had a high unemployment rate, widespread poverty, and a population that was mostly unskilled. Half the people live in overcrowded and tight towns with no proper sewage or clean water. To understand how shocking this was, think of Europe in the same period. In 1965, France was building its first high-speed train. Germany was already an industrial giant. Britain still had global influence. Meanwhile, Singapore had a per capita GDP lower than many African nations. The average life expectancy was just 65 years. One out of every four workers had a no job. The future looked impossible. And yet, within one generation, the same Iceland would overtake almost every European economy. How did that happen? Let's go back to the very first decision that changed everything. The new government now they had no time to waste. They did not have gold, oil, or coal. They only had one thing their location. Singapore sits right at the entrance of the Strait of Malacca, one of the busiest shipping routes in the world. Every year, thousands of ships pass by carrying oil from the Middle East to China and Japan and manufacture goods from Asia to Europe. Lee Kuan Yew understood that if he could make Singapore the most efficient, safest, and cleanest port in Asia, ships would stop there. And when they stop, they need fuel, food, repairs, banking, insurance, and lawyers. That was the seat of the entire transformation. But there was a massive problem. The port was dirty, inefficient, and full of corruption. Dock workers stole cargo, containers sort of weak. So the government did something radical. They declared war on corruption, not just small corruption, but the kind that had destroyed other developing countries. They put senior minister in jail. They paid port worker a fair wage, and then said if you take even $1 extra, you lose your job and your pension. Within 5 years, Singapore ports become the fastest in the world. A ship could dock, unload, and leave in less than 24 hours. In other Asian ports, that took a week. That was the first brick of the economic miracle. But the port alone would not make Singapore rich. For that, they needed something else, something that Europe had already mastered. And that brings you to the second phase of the transformation. By 1917, Singapore had a working port, but the government realized something crucial. A port only generates so much money. The real wealth comes when you take raw material, turn them into finished products, and sell them at 10 times the price. In other words, Singapore needed factories. But why would any company build a factory in a teeny, unknown island with no history of manufacturing? The answer was simple. They would come if the conditions were better than anywhere else. So Lee Kuan Yew and his economic team did something brilliant. They invited American and European electronics companies like Texas Instruments, Hewlett Packard, and General Electric. They said, "Come to Singapore. We will build your factory for you. We will give you tax holidays for 10 years. We will train your workers for free. We will never have a strike because we will make striking very difficult, and we will protect your investment with strict laws." That was unheard of at the time. Most developing countries were nationalizing foreign companies or kicking them out. Singapore did the opposite. They welcomed foreign capital. with open arms and in work. By the mind 1917, Singapore was assembling computer parts, radios, and television. Unemployed dropped from 40% to just 4%. The shanty towns began to, but there was another problem. The workers were mostly uneducated. You cannot run modern factories with people who never finish primary school. So the government made another radical decision. They decided to invest heavily in English language education. Why English? Because English was the language of global trade, science and technology. They scrapped the old multi-language system and made English the first language in every school. At the same time, they kept Mandarin, Malay and Tamil as second languages. Preserve culture root. This decision was painful. Many older Singaporeans struggled, but within 10 years, a new generation emerged that could read technical manuals, communicate with American engineers, and negotiate with European buyers. That was the secret weapon. While another Asian countries had cheap labor, Singapore had cheap educated English-speaking labor. The combination was irresistible. By 1918, Singapore had achieved something remarkable. It had moved from third world poverty to middle income prosperity. But the leader knew that if they stopped there, they would be stuck forever. China was beginning to open up. India would soon follow. Both countries had billions of people and much cheaper labor. Singapore could not compete on low wages forever, so they began preparing for the next leap. The late 1918 and 1919 were a dangerous time for Singapore. Their neighbors like Malaysia, Thailand, and later China started offering the same tax incentives, the same export processing zones, and much cheaper workers. If Singapore continued doing the same thing, they would be crushed. So the government did something that very few countries have ever successfully done. They decided to move up the value chain. They stopped subsidizing law and factories. Instead, they invest billions into high-tech industries like semiconductor, pharmaceuticals, precious engineering, and later biomedical sciences. They built a world-class science and engineering university, the National University of Singapore, and attracted top researchers from Europe, America, and Japan. They created the Economic Development Board, a super agency that acted like a venture capitalist for the entire country. If a company wanted to build a silicon wafer fabrication plant, the government would so invest and take a share of the risk. This is where Singapore started to diverge from the typical development path. Most countries try to protect their industries with traffic and subsidies. Singapore did the opposite. They forced their own companies to compete globally or die. They signed free trade agreements with almost every major economy, including the European Union, the United States, Japan, and China. They removed import traffic completely on most goods. They made it easier to start a business than everywhere else. Today, you can register a new company in Singapore in just 50 minutes. Entire online. It's part of Europe that can take weeks. The results were staggering. By the year 2000, Singapore per capita GDP has surpassed that of many European countries, including Portugal, Greece, and Spain. By 2010, it had overtaken Italy and was closing in on Germany and France. And then something extraordinary happened in 2020. Singapore per capita GDP, adjusted for purchasing power, actually exceeded that of Germany, France, the United Kingdom, and even the United States. A tiny island with no resources, no army, no water, and no land had become one of the richest nations on earth. But how did they solve the basic problem of survival? Because remember, Singapore has no water, no food, and very little land. For most countries, those would be fatal weaknesses. For Singapore, they become strengths. Let me explain. Imagine a country that has to buy water from its neighbor. That is exactly Singapore's situation. For decades, they bought water from Malaysia under a long-term agreement, but the Malaysian government has repeatedly threatened to cut off supply during political disputes. Most countries would panic. Singapore decided to engineer their way out. They built something called New Water. This is ultra clean recycled water, and they use water from sinks, showers, and toilet, clean it with advanced membranes technology, and then purify it again until it's actually cleaner than regular tap water. Today, new water supplies 14% of Singapore's water need. By 2016, they aim for 18%. The rest come from rainwater collected in a network of reserves, canals, and even city drains. Every single drop of rain Singapore is captured and stored. They have become one of the few countries in the world that has achieved water security without relying on natural lakes or rivers. And what about food? Singapore imports over 19% of its food. That sound vulnerable, but there are no building vertical farms inside skyscrapers, rooftop gardens on public housing, and lab ground meat facilities. Their goal is to produce 13% of their own food by 2013. Not because it is cheaper, but because it is secure. In a world of climate change and supply chain disruptions, Singapore does not want to depend on anyone. So finally, land. Singapore is just 733 square kilometers, smaller than many European cities. Yet, they house 5.7 million people, run a major airport, one of the busiest ports in the world, and have power, resource, and military bases. How? They build upwards. More than 18% of Singaporeans live in high-rise public housing, but not the kind you might imagine. These are clean, safe, well-maintained apartments with gardens, playgrounds, and swimming pools. They are not poor people housing. In fact, many middle-class families prefer them because they are affordable and well designed. Singapore also reclaimed land from the sea. Our 20% of the country current land area did not exist 15 years ago. It was built using sand import from neighbor countries. That is how desperate and determined they have been. So what is the final lesson from Singapore story? It is not about results. It is not about luck. It is about long-term thinking, brutal honesty about your weaknesses, and the discipline to do the hard things the other countries are unwilling to do. They eliminated corruption before they built factories. They taught English before the benefits arrived. They invest in technology before they needed it. And they solve their survival problems decades in advance. For a European audience, the comparison is fascinating. Europe has water, land, skilled workers, and centuries of history. Singapore had none of that, and yet in 15 years they went from poverty to become a global benchmark. The question is not whether Singapore is lucky. The question is, what can the rest of the world learn from a country that turned every disadvantage into advantage? That is the story of how small, poor, forgotten Iceland became one of the most powerful economies in the world, and the most surprising part, they are just getting started. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. My channel is still new and I truly need your support to grow. If there were any mistakes in this video, I kindly ask you to forgive me and understand me as a beginner. Your support means a lot to me. I will see you in another new video. Until then, take care of yourself. Goodbye.